Hello, this is the September 20th, 2010 issue of United Nations Week News and Views. My name is John Kerry. The purpose of the program is to bring to your attention information about recent events at the UN and provide you with some views on those events, which are my own unless I indicate some other source. Today I want to talk about a changing of the guard at the Human Rights Committee, how the General Assembly is making plans for the new session, the 65th session, which starts this week, and finally the UN on hate groups. About changing of the guard, well, the Human Rights Committee was created by the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and it's been in existence for a very long time. On September 2nd, elections were held in the states meeting of the states parties, that is the countries that have joined up with the International Covenant. The terms of 9 incumbent members of the committee are up at the end of this year, and their seats were filled by 9 out of 16 candidates. 6 incumbents were re-elected, the following: Abdel Fattah Amour of Tunisia, Christine Chenet of France, Yuji Owasawa of Japan, Helen Keller of Switzerland, Zanka Zanella Madjodina of South Africa, and Yulia Antoanella Motok of Romania. Well, that's 6. 9 were to be elected, and here are the names of the 3 newcomers. One is an old friend, Cornelius Flinterman of the Netherlands. Then we have Gerald Newman of the U.S. and Margot Waterval of Suriname. Flinterman, known to his friends as Keys, was his country's alternate member of the former UN Human Rights Subcommission at the time when I was alternate U.S. member. Another old friend is Gerald Newman's predecessor, Ruth Wedgwood. Both Newman and Wedgwood are prominent international law professors in the United States, as is Keys Flinterman. Now, the General Assembly's plans for the 65th session, starting right now. On September 17th, the Assembly adopted an agenda of over 120 items for the work of the session beginning this week. 2 new agenda items are harmony with nature. Now, when you hear the names of some of these items, you have to believe that some really far-out things were suggested and that some of them were just laughed off by the great majority of the Assembly members. Others found traction and may have made their way into the agenda as adopted, but others were dealt with in compromise fashion, as you'll shortly see. Financing of the United Nations Organization Stabilization Mission in the Congo received the same treatment as harmony with nature. The Assembly also decided to include the, quote, question of the Comorian island of Mayotte. That's the Mayotte is in the Comorian Islands in the Indian Ocean. But that was adopted on the understanding that there would be no consideration of the matter until further notice. Now there's a real compromise for you. It was decided to defer to the 66th session consideration of the question of the Malagasy Islands of Glorias, Juan Nova, Europa, and Basas da India. Consideration was postponed to a later date on whether to include the following items: Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. Another one, compensation for damage caused by colonialism. Another one, verification of the implementation of nuclear disarmament obligations. Also, enhancing and expanding the functions and powers of the General Assembly. That would have taken an awful lot of time, taken away from other possibly more pertinent matters if it had been adopted. But this consideration of it was postponed. The Assembly decided not to include on agenda items on investigation into the invasion of Iraq, investigation into wars that have broken out since the establishment of the United Nations, and investigation into assassinations carried out since the establishment of the United Nations. These rejected items, as you can well imagine, would have taken an enormous amount of time and diverted the Assembly's attention from other more pertinent and pressing matters. Well, the Assembly decided that its session now beginning would recess on the 14th of December, take a break, and then resume in 2011, but would close, finally end on the 12th of September in 2011. And the Assembly set meeting schedules for its main committees. The first committee on disarmament and international security, fourth committee, special political and decolonization committee, the sixth or legal committee, the second or economic and financial committee, and the third committee on social, humanitarian, and cultural matters. And finally, the fifth committee, administrative and budgetary. They're scheduled to keep at it until the 10th of December 2011. Now I turn to the subject of hate groups and the UN position on them. And I approach this subject with the following recollection. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, what I used to hear from classmates mind you, of the same age, was, "I hate that man in the White House." FDR was the subject of expressions of hate. Now, where did the kids get this from? Of course, they got it at home, because grown-ups were expressing hate for Roosevelt. And I suggest that similar things are being expressed these days about President Obama. I know this in a very specific way because my college class has a listserv, and there are among the classmates some articulate extreme right-wingers, and what they say about President Obama I would not care to repeat, but it certainly is hate. Well, where are we going with hate groups? The Special Rapporteur on Racism, Racial Discrimination, Xenophobia, and Related Intolerance talks about extremist political groups, movements, and parties. And he says the rise of such organizations is often linked to the difficulty or sometimes failure of the traditional parties to deal adequately with social and economic issues such as immigration, unemployment, and insecurity. Isn't that exactly what's going on now? There's widespread frustration among the American people with the failure of Congress to deal with such matters as immigration, unemployment, and insecurity. And this kind of atmosphere generates hate groups, and we must all be aware of that. And hate groups frequently blame sufficient part of the population for their problems and put forward simplistic and populist solutions, often exacerbating racist and xenophobic attitudes by designating certain vulnerable groups like migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers or members of minorities as the main source of the problems that are causing their anxiety. In times of economic turmoil, migrants are often accused of stealing employment from nationals. And we hear it said that the only legitimate holders of the national identity of our country are part groups that can be led by extremist opinion. And there are those in our society who claim the prerogative of designating which groups in the society are genuine and which are outsiders. And I have heard it said that President Obama is other, and otherness is emphasized as a tool by hate groups to differentiate or create artificial differences between certain groups of the population, according to this UN study. And the special rapporteur in the study notes that public figures, especially politicians, have a greater capacity to influence public debate, and therefore they should be politically accountable for bigoted words and for inflaming anger and passion against particular groups and creating a climate of fear among vulnerable groups. The legal perspective only is an insufficient avenue to pursue in combating extremist groups. It is necessary to tackle the root causes of this phenomenon. Education is a key tool in promoting democratic values and human rights and instilling a sense of tolerance, understanding, and respect at an early age. Educators and parents and other relatives have a particular responsibility to use correct language in speaking with children and avoid sowing seeds of hatred among younger people. Well, friends, that's all for this September 20th issue of United Nations Week News and Views. We'll be back with the next issue. Meantime, do send along your own views on these or other UN-related issues to www.unweek.blogspot.com. Goodbye for now, and thank you very much for watching.